I wanted a resource that not only took into consideration the science behind age-appropriate and intensive way of teaching phonics, but also took into consideration our language learners' language needs. I also knew that I did not want to teach those decoding skills in isolation from other areas of language acquisition. Many of us have a lot of plastic tubs stuffed with flashcards and perhaps books from the dollar section in Target. Hello, dear ELL teaching colleagues. My name is Alyona Green. I have been teaching English as a second and as a foreign language, as well as Russian as a foreign language and Russian to heritage speakers for over 20 years now. Like many of you, I love everything about languages. However, as I was forming as a teacher, one of my biggest professional passions became teaching reading to older newcomers and SLIVE students. In today's video, I'm excited to share with you 3 of my biggest tips when it comes to working with older students on their foundational reading skills. And also, I would like to invite you to participate in my special offer that I have prepared for this month. Many of you are already using my interactive reading drills, part 1, and I have finally released part 2. Stay here for the rest of the video to find out how you can receive free copies of either part 1 or part 2 or both. And now let's move to the tips. To give you a little bit of a better picture into my background so you understand the rationale behind my tips, let me share with you that early on in my career in the US schools, in the early 2000s, I realized that I was not really ever 100% happy with any reading resources that were offered to us, the ESL, ELL, MLL teachers for older newcomers and SLIVE students. I became very interested in the field and I took a lot of early literacy trainings, including Orton Gillingham, letters, and others. And as an ESL teacher, of course, I got my SIAP certification, and just a couple of years ago, I became a SIAP trainer. I'm a second language learner myself, plus I wanted to expand my repertoire as much as possible as a language teacher, so I also got my certification in CLIL, which what I call is a European version of SIAP. There are some differences. If you're interested, I will sure share some links about that methodology. When all of these elements of my background came together, I became very clear about what I was looking for. I wanted a resource that not only took into consideration the science behind effective, age-appropriate, and intensive way of teaching phonics, phonemic awareness, and decoding skills, and further on, but also took into consideration our language learners' language needs. And first of all, the lack of vocabulary in all 3 areas: survival English, academic, and content vocabulary. I also knew that I did not want to teach those decoding skills in isolation from other areas of language acquisition. I wanted to involve as much speaking and writing as possible from day 1 of those intensive decoding lessons I was offering to my older newcomers and SLIVE students. Based on these general directions and professional experience, my tip number 1 is to try to get as good of an idea of your students' existing English language reading skills. For that, you should use an inventory or a diagnostic test. My favorite comes from the 6-Minute Solution Reading Intervention books. It offers phonetic elements, for example, letters and sounds, then 3-letter short vowel word, CVC, E, vowel combinations, and so on. It will also assess your students' sight word knowledge, and if you discover that your students are beyond the decoding stage and are ready for some fluency practice and further vocabulary acquisition, you can offer them these passages for assessment of the level. But of course, be careful here because these are created for native speakers, and native speakers will be able to decode some unfamiliar words based on the context and their background knowledge of the topic of these passages. Our language learners will not. So I use these passages just to determine how they're handling text, how much they are understanding, how much vocabulary they know, but I am not going to get a true measurement of their oral reading fluency if they are very new students, like first or second year language learners. My tip number 2, have a clear scope and sequence of skills and reading rules you're going to be working with. Many of us have a lot of plastic tubs and bookshelves stuffed with flashcards and magnetic tiles and perhaps books from the dollar section in Target. And all of those are great to diversify our instruction, to shake things up, to give that hands-on component, especially to dually identified or SLIVE students, but it's not going to be as effective to offer those as little islands of instruction. You want to know exactly what you're doing, what to expect. Perhaps you already have a good scope and sequence, and maybe you have a resource that you're really happy with. Of course, I'm using my own interactive reading drills. I also love this newcomer phonics book. It is not necessarily for high schoolers, but it works just fine because it's not too babyish, and you can see there are real people here in the pictures. So if you don't have a scope and sequence, you can always look in their contents and see the order in which they provide the introduction and practice of the skills. And of course, one of the most popular scopes and sequences comes from the Recipe to Reading program, which is based on the Orton-Gillingham's approach. The list is right here, and as you can imagine, being Orton-Gillingham's biggest fan, I did use this list as a guidance for the order in which I introduced sounds in the first part of my interactive reading drills. So now we know we need to identify our students' existing language skills. We need to have a clear scope and sequence that introduces and practices sounds in an intensive way. My tip number 3, start pretty early and do not delay reading different texts with your students. Even early on in your decoding lessons, even outside of any rules and sight words that you have introduced. This is going to give them immediate, authentic application of the skills, and also is going to expand their reading experience and will allow them to start developing that linguistic intuition and figuring things out on their own. I am not just talking about decodable readers or short stories that are artificially created to practice decoding skills in a focused and targeted way. I'm also talking about leveled informational readers with big pictures. And even something like that where you can choose to read the bigger captions and give summaries of the texts, but also read picture books. I especially like realistic fiction stories because our students can relate to them. I do have several videos about using realistic picture books for language development experiences for our newcomers. I'll put the links below. So those are my 3 tips, and now let me show you part 2 of my interactive reading drills. And if you want to learn more about my rationale for the way I approach reading instruction, I will also put a link below to the video where I talk about it in detail. So this is part 2 of my interactive reading drills. The first lesson is a review of everything we learned in part 1, which was all of the short vowels, the consonants, and the digraph CH and QU. Those are some of the sight words we've practiced, and this is a new sound, or sounds rather. These are initial consonant blends. As usual, I offer an opportunity to decode without pictures, then I do offer picture support, and then they write a spelling test. This is a speaking/reading practice of the lesson. You will see sentences here, and students are using the reading words in sentences. Expanding vocabulary on the same topic, which here is classroom supplies. We continue adding more words with initial consonant blends, as you can see here. Again, and I repeat the process of asking them to decode without pictures, then add visual support and ask them to write dictation. Speaking part with new sight word. This is like. Again, sentences and an opportunity to practice these sentences with gradual release of responsibility and a little bit more of the same kind of practice. Some students like it and others don't need it or don't like it, so I make it an optional activity.
opportunity. We're moving on to lesson 3 with more initial consonant blend words. Again, the same process. I stay consistent, speaking, review of the previous sight words and some new sight words. And in this speaking and reading section, I offer a text about a blog. Again, some comprehension questions and an opportunity to practice fluency and then to remember new vocabulary words and sight words and to retell the story. This is next lesson with new blends. You see these are R blends, gr, tr, kr, and so on. Review of all the previous sight words, new sight word. And here we address the topic of clothes because the word dress was one of the reading words, so I thought it would make sense. And then students, of course, are making sentences with those words. The accumulation of all of the words we've read so far, new initial blends that start with the letter S. Here they write the spell and check again, new speaking practice. And here I introduce the concept of action verbs and also subject. Here they get to talk about their day. Lesson 6, we review the old consonant blends. Here we have new ones. Those are ending, final consonant blends. And here are our reading words with those. This is a new word, live, and here I have little riddles for them to guess while we use all of the sight words, the decodable words, and the new sight word live. Lesson 7 review of the previous final blends. Again, the accumulated list in new words. Spell and check, and then a text. Speak and practice, all of the sight words, new sight words, and here, as you can guess, we are talking about sequence of events. Lots of practice here, and then an opportunity for them to produce a text using pictures. Lesson 8 is a cumulative review of all of the decoding skills, sight words, some of the grammar skills such as verbs and language arts skill of sequencing. And this is our final text. I tried to put together all of the skills from the 7 lessons and some comprehension work, and this is the end of part 2.
And my special offer for March 2023 is for you to please leave a review to part 1 in my TPT, and as my gift to you, you will receive part 2 absolutely free. Just make sure to leave your review by March 29th, 2023. And also on April 3rd, on Monday, I will have a super short Zoom meeting for everybody who would like to enter their name to win either part for free as well. Happy teaching, everyone!